Studio Ghibli, an anime studio that basically every movie fan knows about, even if they aren't interested in anime. They have a unique visual style and tell calming and fun stories that can easily be enjoyed by anyone. They're one of my favorite studios and have made what I'd consider several of my favorite movies of all time. There's still a few of their films I haven't seen yet, but I have an interesting opportunity now to look back at some of my favorites and talk about them. Shout Factory and G-Kids are working together to distribute all of Studio Ghibli's catalog on Apple TV. They just released a new bundle that contains The Wind Rises, Secret World of Arrietty, Porco Rosso, The Cat Returns, Valley of the Wind, and Castle in the Sky. You can get the films separately or buy them in the bundle together and save $20. So thank you to Shout Factory for providing me some review codes for these movies, so I can share with you all how these movies are definitely worth checking out if you haven't seen them yet. Of all these films, Secret World of Arrietty is my favorite, so that's what we'll talk about today. The story follows titular young girl Arrietty and her family of borrowers. Borrowers are a mysterious species of small humans who live alongside us normal humans. They're kind and careful, and just make do with borrowing tiny pieces of supplies from us normal humans. A sickly young boy named Sean spends his summer at his great-aunt's house, where Arrietty and her family are also secretly residing. Sean ends up spotting Arrietty during her first ever attempt to borrow some human supplies. Even though Sean is sweet and simply wants to learn about Arrietty's world and even help her family, Arrietty and her family decide they need to move somewhere else before any other humans find out about them. And of course eventually, the housemaid Haru discovers the borrower family and becomes a real threat. You can't have a Ghibli movie without an evil old lady antagonist, so Sean and Arrietty must work together to save the borrowers from being exposed. Part of what's so interesting about this movie, and basically all of the studio's films, is the strong grounded fantasy aspect of it. That's just something I always love seeing. The story takes place in this normal, peaceful world we can all relate to, and there's just a small bit of fantasy thrown in to make it exciting. It's a nice, beautiful, and calming movie that creates a simple magical world without the need for a bunch of exposition. In fact, there really isn't even much dialogue in this movie now that I think about it. There's a lot of show don't tell. You just get to see the world from this interesting perspective. You're sort of thrown right in there, but it's in no way hard to understand. They just never overcomplicate things. Like, there's an interesting subplot about how Arrietty's family might be the only borrowers left in existence. There's a lot you can interpret from the dialogue they share about that, but there's no focus on the borrowers as a society. The movie's just about Arrietty and the one house that they happen to be living in. If you want the supplemental lore, you kind of just make it up for yourself. There's also an interesting story aspect about how the borrowers are perceived by people. Like, Sean's whole family considers the borrowers these little fairy tale creatures. There's a family history that implies they've been living in the aunt's house for years, but only a few family members had ever actually seen them, so they don't know whether or not to believe them or not. They just kind of use it as a cute story. The housemaid Haru believes they're real, and she really wants to prove it, to make some sort of statement about how she isn't crazy. She doesn't care about their well-being, she just wants some sort of fame. But everyone else in the family knows to respect the borrowers, and they're overjoyed when they eventually find out that they're real. It's very sweet and cute, and it teaches a nice moral too. And again, it's all subtly present throughout the plot. It's weaved in there in a way that just feels very nice and natural. I kind of remember this movie being a little more exciting or having more substance to it than it did on this rewatch. But that kind of made me realize that I made up the substance myself. It's cool that such a simple movie can do that, and that's the charming power of something that's just this pure. It plays out in this nice children's book sort of way, where it just feels nice and rounded and concluded by the end, even if it isn't that deep or exciting. There's not a lot of deep danger or peril, there's not a lot of deep lore or character. It's just this cute little story that gives you a glimpse into an interesting pseudo-real world. You would usually think that stories revolving around tiny people would be these big adventures where the characters run from their lives from spiders and other predators and stuff. But there's quite literally nothing like that here. And I find that really cool. The scale of the characters is primarily used to just really scope in on how beautiful the tiny things in our world are. I'm a huge fan of the Pikmin series of games, and this movie gives that same sort of vibe. You're seeing the world we're so used to from a small perspective, and it emphasizes what's beautiful about the world rather than what's dangerous. There's so many beautiful backgrounds and sort of clever ways these characters learn to traverse the world. It leaves me wanting to see so much more, really. The whole movie is mainly confined to this one house location, and they do everything they can with it. It works really well for the rounded story that's here, but I think a bit more visual variety in the locations would have been welcome. And in this watch through in particular, I noticed some really nice music too. I don't really know much about music, so I don't know exactly how to convey what I want to say, but I get a lot of Professor Layton vibes from the music in this film. It's very adventurous sounding, yet it isn't too grandiose. It's like casually exciting. Remember when this movie was first coming out and they advertised it on Disney Channel all the time? I always remembered wanting to see it, but was too embarrassed to like ever ask anybody to go with me to see it. I never watched much anime at that point, and I kind of felt that this would be a kind of movie that only I would get into and none of my friends or any family would care about. I think we all have movies like that. We know about them for so long, but we only get to watching them years after. Usually they don't disappoint, and they gain a special place in our hearts because of how much we had to think about them. And that's definitely Arrietty for me. There used to be ads for this all the time because the voice cast was pretty notable to young Disney Channel fans like myself. Bridget Mendler from Good Luck Charlie voices Arrietty, and David Henry from Wizards of Waverly Place voices Sean. Actually, the two of them were on Wizards and like their characters dated, right? Is that why they casted them both for this movie? That's pretty interesting. Bridget Mendler's performance as Arrietty is really good. She has like a perfect dubbing voice for this kind of character. She sounds like a real girl, you know? Not like an exaggerated anime girl, which is pretty common for them to do with this kind of thing. David Henry has a fitting voice too for Sean. But my goodness, why does he pronounce Arrietty's name so weird? Like, he pauses in the middle of it, he's like, Arrietty, Arrietty. Like, why? Nobody else says it like that in the movie, so why does he talk like that? And sometimes he's a bit too monotone, but I'm sure that's just the direction he was given. He's supposed to be kind of like a somber character, but he could have shown a bit more emotion in the voice. Also, Will Arnett, aka BoJack Horseman, is in this, which is a weird coincidence because I just talked about that show. He's pretty good here, but he kind of talks like Hoss Delgado from Billy and Mandy. He also doesn't really have that many lines anyways. This movie is just so nice. And that's what can be said about all of Ghibli's works, basically. Films don't always need to convey big adventures. In fact, this movie quite literally conveys a small adventure. It's probably most similar to Kiki's Delivery Service, so we want to compare it to their other films. Kiki probably has a bit more character going on, but the very casual way that both movies show these fantastical ideas is very similar. This is a wonderful movie that will leave you with a warm, fuzzy feeling that you just can't quite get from any other form of art. I encourage you to check it out if you never have before. It's a great starting point if you want to get into the studio's catalog. I've linked below the new Apple TV bundle, so if you want to get this film and other great ones like The Wind Rises, check out that link. In the comments, let me know your thoughts on this movie if you've seen it, and let me know what your favorite Ghibli movie is if you have one. Thanks for watching, and super special thanks to my Patreon supporters. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to know when I post a new video. Be sure to stay tuned for more new videos and live streams. Follow me on Twitter and TikTok to get frequent updates and video clips. And consider supporting me on Patreon for just $2 a month to get some behind-the-scenes content, like scripts and review notes, and even early videos. Once we get about 20 Patreon supporters, I'll start a Discord server for us to chat.